Hi there, and welcome to the Compassionate Communications series brought to you by the Command Experience Office and Diversity Champion here at Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton. I'm Dr. Alex Alexander, and this is a 4-course training series to improve communications and outcomes facility-wide. Our series is for providers and physicians, and in Course 1 we're going to cover learning to listen, which is a basic skill set for providers. In Course 2, we're going to talk about patient-centered communications, which is truly the cornerstone of the Therapeutic Alliance. In Course 3, we're going to look at rethinking the difficult patient and strategies for succeeding. And then in Course 4, we're going to discuss compassionate delivery of difficult information. The conceptual background for this training is the Chasson and Loeb 2013 article titled High Reliability Healthcare, Getting There From Here. And as we mostly know now, the substantial progress that's been made towards high reliability in healthcare organizational settings has been made because of the 3 following tenets. First, the leadership's commitment to the ultimate goal of zero patient harm. Second is the incorporation of all the principles and practices of a safety culture throughout our organizations. And then third is the widespread adoption and deployment of the most effective process improvement tools and methods out there. The training objectives of our series begin with our leadership's commitment to zero patient harm. So how do we get there? Well, we need to expand our thought processes and skill improvement in the area of communications as a result of what we know about best practices from our current literature regarding the impact of communication on patient outcomes and our providers' success. Second is the incorporation of all the principles and practices of a safety culture. So we need to develop the ability to see the benefit of improved provider-patient communications in terms of these projected probabilities of better outcomes. And this is all based on current scientific knowledge. And third, adoption and deployment of the most effective process improvement tools and methods out there. So if we use highly effective ways to solve complex communications problems as tools to exercise the personal responsibility of patient safety, the outcomes will be improved as a result. So now let's begin the first course in our series, titled Learning to Listen, which is basic skills for providers. The training objectives of Course 1 begin with training participants to understand the concepts, importance, and benefits of counseling and communications in the primary care or specialty medical setting. Second, to introduce the participants to the basic listening and counseling techniques known as active/reflective listening using 2 different models. Third is we'd like to raise your awareness to paraverbal and nonverbal cues in the primary and specialty care setting. And then finally, we'd like to introduce the concept of PEARLS, which is a mnemonic for patient communications. So why improve communications in the first place? The main reason is for patient outcomes. We've learned from studies on doctor-patient communications that patients are discontented even when their doctors think that they are communicating adequately or even excellently to their patients. Doctors tend to overestimate their abilities in communication. In fact, one study showed that 75% of the orthopedic surgeons surveyed believed that they communicated satisfactorily with their patient, but only 21% of the patients reported satisfactory communications with their doctors. Patient surveys have consistently shown that what patients want is better communications with their doctors. So the take-home message of good communications? Studies have shown that good provider communication skills improve patient compliance and overall satisfaction as well as outcomes. And providers who are considered good communicators are less likely to have legal action pursued against them in the event of an unexpected or undesired outcome. So if you add improved outcomes together with less legal action, this would provide a great incentive for providers and practitioners of any kind of medical discipline to become better communicators. Good provider communications can clearly disseminate proper information, can more clearly explain the necessity and yield of expensive investigations and the risks and benefits involved, and can manage difficult encounters and break bad news with less emotional impact than poor communicators can. Formal training of providers in improving communication skills has been shown to improve overall patient outcomes, and that's the bottom line in any medical setting, particularly those who are striving to be high reliability organizations. There's 2 important tenets of listening well that we should discuss. One is listening is not passive. It's important to indicate that you hear your patients and that good communication skills require listening before acting to solve a patient's problem. Gathering all the information is essential to a good outcome. These are comments from cards here at our facility. The doctor looked down, typing the whole time I was talking. The doctor interrupted me as though he knew what I was saying, but he was actually wrong about what I was saying. So, here's some thoughts on good verbal listening skills. Showing interest, gathering information, encouraging the speaker to develop their ideas, communicating our understanding of the ideas, requesting clarification, and then building that therapeutic alliance, which is easily summarized as "you tell me more. I heard you saying we are a team." And it's interesting to note that listening and silent are spelled with the same letters. So what's the payout of good listening skills? Well, using good verbal listening skills increases the chances that you're going to understand what the patient is saying and that they're going to understand what you're saying. And you'll also create a situation where you'll be able to develop that therapeutic alliance with your patient and their family. So what's a therapeutic alliance anyway? Well, a good therapeutic alliance begins with a provider who has respect for the patient and has the ability to share information in terms that the patient can understand. So, for example, trying to understand that a sick or injured patient is highly vulnerable is the first step. Being respectful goes a long way toward helping the patient explain symptoms, taking responsibility for decision making, and complying with your instructions. It's okay to use medical speak in complicated terms as long as they are accompanied by an explanation. Looking like you're listening is really not enough. So a model for basic listening skills is one that comes from the motivational interviewing paradigm, and that is asking open and closed questions, using encouragers, paraphrasing what you heard, reflecting on feelings, and summarizing those feelings. The basic approach to interactions in motivational interviewing, which is a counseling technique most people learn in medical school and counseling school, is captured by the acronym OARS. So the O is asking open-end question. Affirmations is the A, which is encouraging and paraphrasing. Reflective listening is the R, and then summarizing or summaries is the S. The acronym gives a nice image because it gives us the power to move, yet it's not a powerboat. We don't zip through our patient encounter. Yet with sustained effort, OARS can take us a really long way. Asking open-ended questions is the O in OARS. And open-ended questions typically start with what, how, why, or could. Open questions set the tone for a warm, safe environment to gather information, encourage further discussion, and learn more about your patient. Open question examples. The provider might ask, how has the baby been eating? The provider might ask, what is the baby's bedtime routine? And the provider might ask, could you tell me about giving the baby the medicine in the morning? Closed questions generally start with is, are, or do. And closed questions can be appropriate if you're trying to gather specific information really quickly. The problem with closed questions is as they sound, they tend to close down the discussion. So we like to avoid in good communications using why questions. Examples of closed questions would be, are you giving the medicine every day? Which, as you can hear in my tone, can be construed as a negative question. Another closed question is the baby able to tolerate the medicine in the morning? Why or why not? Think of how each sentence feels to you. Why did you wait so long to come to the clinic? Versus, what made it hard for you to come to the clinic? Now, other than my exaggerated tone, I'm certain that you can hear the difference. The first one sounds accusatory, blames the patient for taking a long time to come in, almost putting the burden of responsibility completely on them, as opposed to gathering information about why it was hard for the patient to come to the clinic without asking them the why question. Using encouragers, affirm your patient. That's the A in OARS. Here's an example. Yes, I understand the baby doesn't wake on a regular schedule, or repeat a word or two of what was said by the patient. And the affirmation would be, It's hard juggling parenting at work. The patient might say, the baby doesn't tolerate the medicine in the morning, and the provider could say, I see, say more about that, and then throw in the affirmation. Making a routine change is difficult, because encouragers serve to encourage further discussion. Here's another example of encouragers. The patient might say, I missed my appointment last week because of transportation problems. The provider might say, transportation problems? This question allows the patient to choose to say more, and the provider can seek clarification if needed. And if the patient does answer a question or give a comment that needs clarification, don't hesitate to seek that clarification. Here's a question that sounds a little confusing. My baby vomited the medicine you prescribed her this morning. Is the parent asking for information or expressing concern? It's really hard to know. So the provider could use clarifying questions to gain information. The provider might say, are you worried the baby is sick? Because by asking this question, the provider is validating or affirming that the parent is concerned and evaluating the concern by allowing the parent the chance to describe what they see as the problem. Paraphrasing is an affirmation opportunity. Briefly summarize the content of the discussion in your paraphrasing. The patient might say, the baby took the medicine just fine all week until this morning. I've always given it in the morning like you said, but today she threw it up and then wouldn't take her bottle either. So the provider might say, sounds like you are saying, and then paraphrase back what you heard the patient say. The problem with the medicine started today, and that she also didn't want her bottle. Is that right? Patient, yes, and I am worried that the medicine is making my baby sick. Provider, it sounds like you're worried about the medicine. And then the provider could throw in an affirmation that states, I'm sorry you're feeling worried. This is something that's just, if naturally done and feels normal to you, can certainly show the patient the empathy that you may not take the time to otherwise show them. Reflection on the patient's feelings is the R in ORS. Focus on the feelings, both stated and unstated. We use reflective listening to do this. So reflective listening checks your understanding, shows that you heard what was said, and acknowledges and accepts feelings without judging. It serves to communicate understanding of emotion and confirm the accuracy of your understanding, encouraging discussion on the patient's feelings. Reflecting on feelings, example would be, patient, yes I am. I don't see many changes in the baby since I started the medicine, and now she's throwing up and not eating. So the provider might say, it sounds like you're worried that the medicine is not helping your baby get better, or that it's actually making her sicker. That sounds stressful. Thank you for telling me your concerns so I can think about them with you. So you caught the little added affirmation in there. Good communicators have the ability to effectively manage patients' expectations. Good communicators help the patient understand what's happening, what the possible outcomes are, and what the ramifications might be. Good communicators do not interrupt or stereotype patients, and good communicators listen carefully and respectfully with knowledge that the extra time will go a long way toward better outcomes for the patient. Summarizations is the S in ORS. So we're pulling together all the information from the interview. The summarizations serve to organize the structure of the interview and check the accuracy of understanding. Here's an example. Provider, during the time we've had together, we've talked about your baby's eating and sleeping patterns, the timing of the baby's medication, problems with transportation, and the worry that you shared as to whether the baby is getting better or worse on the medicine. Is that right? And then just wait for an answer. Here's a little bit more in terms of statistics on doctors and communication. A woman walks into a doctor's office. Sounds like a really good joke. The doctor says, "What brings you here today?" The woman starts to answer, and 18 seconds later, the doctor interrupts. 2 decades ago, in 1984, researchers showed that on average, patients were interrupted 18 seconds into explaining their problems. Fewer than 2% got to finish their explanations. So in 1999, the same researcher published a follow-up to his original study, and patients were no longer interrupted on average at 18 seconds. It took 23 seconds this time, and that was 72% of doctor visits. So a little improvement, but not enough. I'd like to discuss now this concept of paraverbal and nonverbal communication. Paraverbal communication refers to the messages that we transmit through the tone, pitch, and pacing of our voices. It is how we say something, not what we say. A big piece of the communications pie is this paraverbal or nonverbal communications. Verbal communications accounts for 35%, nonverbal 65% of all the communication that you're having with another person. We notice body language, a person's stance, posture, physical tension. All of this speaks volumes. We can acknowledge what we observe and be open and candid about it to be good communicators. Here's some examples. Provider, I noticed you seem a little uncomfortable after I recommended to keep giving your baby the medicine. Would you like to talk more about the medicine and why I think it's important to keep giving it? So, what examples of nonverbal communication can you notice or can you think about? Think about how you feel when you're annoyed, scared, frustrated, or confused. What do you do with your arms, your legs, your facial expressions? Just look in the mirror and try and imagine yourself confused or frustrated or scared, and kind of watch what happens to your body, because that's what other people are seeing. Amy Cuddy, in The Benefit of Power Posing Before a High-Stakes Social Evaluation, which was published in Harvard Business School working paper in 2012, did a nice piece on body language and why it matters. And this is a great TED Talk if you get the chance to listen to it. It's really super easy to find. High power body language is the top row, and the low power body language is the bottom row. And I won't ruin the entire punchline for you, but the upshot is that people who assumed a high power pose had measurably different chemistry when taken on, I think it was cortisol levels in laboratory studies, and it translated to job interview outcomes. Nonverbal communication, culture, and context also matters quite a lot. Most nonverbal behaviors have multiple meanings depending on your culture or the context. And now let's talk about the relationship building technique known as PEARLS. So what is PEARLS? PEARLS is an acronym for partnership, empathy, apology, respect, legitimization, support. So here's some examples. A physician might say, I can help you in this way to quit smoking, and that would be partnership. You look upset. You seem discouraged. That's empathy. I apologize for being late. Now I want to focus on you. That's apology. That is good insight. This is showing respect. Wow, that is cool. You brought in information from the internet. Most physicians and providers really don't care for this much. However, legitimization is a great approach with your patient. So to find something valuable, truthful, and useful to be able to experience with your patient about their bringing in information for the internet is very legitimizing to the patient. This nodule needs further evaluation, but I'll be there with you, and this shows support. So in short, a good listener maintains eye contact, makes few distracting movements, leans forward facing the speaker, has an open posture, allows few interruptions, and signals interest with encouragers and facial expressions. Try and think of other examples of good listening. Bad listeners make little eye contact, often make distracting movements and face away from the speaker, have closed postures like their arms would be crossed, interrupts a lot, do too many things while they're listening, and have flat affects speaking in a monotone, giving few signals of interest. What are other examples of bad listening? So here's some listening practice scenarios that you can try on your own. If you have a group of 3 people, you might get into a group. One person begins by talking about a troublesome situation. Be brief, but allow your partner opportunities to practice listening skills. The listening partner provides at least 3 different types of listening responses as the partner talks. The third person is the observer and uses the model or checklist items to identify the different listening skills that they notice, and then switch roles so that every person has a chance to fill each role. And then here is an abbreviated list of the OARS model and the basic listening checklist. Remember that the goal of active listening is in part to help the speaker feel understood. So think carefully about the thoughts and feelings the individual stated or implied. Try to imagine yourself in their place in order to understand their message, and make brief verbal statements communicating what you heard without judgment or argumentation. Then check in to see if you're right. The take-home message here is that the outcome of good provider communications is the best patient care possible. With effective listening skills, providers can assist patients in communicating what's important to them and reduce unfavorable outcomes. And when you understand where a patient is starting from and what's standing in the way for them, it's easier to partner with the patient to help them remove those obstacles to becoming well. So here's a quick look. There's the PEARLS technique: partnership, empathy, apology, respect, and legitimization, and then support. And then the ORS model at the bottom there. And then there's the checklist for asking open and closed questions, using encouragers, paraphrasing, reflecting, and summarizing. And then here's a little reminder of how important nonverbal communication is. And then back from the very beginning of our training, there's the little phrase, "You tell me more. I heard you saying we are a team." Is to keep your ears open. There's my son when he was quite small, looking in his stuffed Dalmatian's ear. And here's my contact information. Again, I'm Dr. Alex Alexander, and I appreciate your attention. Stay tuned for training number 2. Thank you so much.